Once upon a time, in a very old era, there was a king who had a magnificent palace. Within the palace grounds was a beautiful garden filled with various kinds of flowering plants and trees bearing an array of sweet fruits. However, the most remarkable thing in the garden was an apple tree that bore golden apples. The king had made special arrangements to ensure the care and protection of this tree. Guards were assigned to watch over the tree day and night, especially when the fruits ripened, to ensure that no one could steal the golden apples. One day, the gardener counted the golden apples and discovered that one apple was missing. He immediately ran to inform the king. The king hurried to the garden and was astonished to find that, despite the strict security arrangements, someone had managed to steal one of the apples. The king announced that anyone who could uncover the thief would be rewarded. The eldest prince then approached the king and said that he would keep watch over the tree at night and try to catch the thief. The king granted him permission. That night, the eldest prince began guarding the tree. However, after just 2 hours, he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning and counted the apples, he was shocked to find that another apple had been stolen during the night. The middle prince then took on the task of guarding the tree, but he too fell asleep, and a third apple was stolen. The king was deeply worried, and even the courtiers were at a loss as to what to do. Everyone sat there, dejected, when suddenly the youngest prince came forward and said, "I will keep watch tonight and catch the thief." The king was not fond of this prince and often considered him foolish. Scolding him, the king said, "What do you think? Do you believe you can succeed? Your elder brothers, who are more capable and wise than you, have already failed. Go and mind your own business." But the youngest prince was adamant and pleaded with the king to give him a chance. Finally, the king relented. The youngest prince began his watch that night, determined not to fall asleep under any circumstances and to catch the thief. At midnight, when the last bell struck 12, the prince saw a beautiful golden bird flying in from somewhere and perching on the apple tree. Before his eyes, the bird plucked a golden apple with its beak. The prince quickly took aim and shot an arrow, but it missed the bird. Startled, the bird fluttered its wings and flew away. However, one of its golden feathers fell to the ground. Next morning, the youngest prince told the king everything that had happened and showed him the golden feather. The feather was so beautiful and valuable that the king couldn't take his eyes off it. He said, "If a single feather of that bird is so magnificent, imagine how beautiful the whole bird must be. I want someone to bring me that bird." The eldest prince set out first on this mission. After traveling for a while, he reached a forest where he saw a fox resting under a tree. Seizing the opportunity, the prince strung an arrow to his bow. Just as he was about to shoot, the fox cried, "Out, prince, don't kill me! I know you are searching for the golden bird. If you listen to my advice, you will succeed quickly. Follow this road straight ahead, and by evening you will reach a village. There you will find 2 inns facing each other. One inn will be beautifully decorated and inviting, but do not stay there. Instead, stay in the other inn, which looks plain and shabby. If you do this, your task will be much easier." The prince laughed at the fox's words and scolded it, saying, "Get out of here! I don't need your advice." With that, he released the arrow, but the clever fox escaped unharmed. The prince continued on his way. By evening, he reached a village where he indeed saw 2 inns by the roadside. One was lavishly decorated, and the sound of music and dancing could be heard from inside. The other inn looked dull and shabby, and there was no activity there. Darkness had fallen, and the prince chose to stay in the beautifully decorated inn. Soon he completely forgot that he had set out to find the golden bird. Meanwhile, when a long time passed and the eldest prince did not return, the middle prince decided to go in search of the golden bird. He too reached the forest after some time, where he encountered the same fox. Like the eldest prince, he ignored the fox's advice. When he reached the village in the evening, he also stayed in the beautifully decorated inn. Getting engrossed in the music and merriment there, he forgot his mission as well, even losing track of his duty to return home. Finally, the youngest prince told the king, "I will go in search of the golden bird." The king doubted his chances of success, reasoning that if the elder princes had failed, this one was even less likely to succeed. But after much insistence, the king gave him permission. The youngest prince prepared himself and set off on the quest for the golden bird. He too came across the fox in the forest. This time, however, the prince listened to the fox's advice attentively and said, "All right, I will do exactly as you say. Go now. I will not harm you." Hearing this, the fox was pleased and said, "You seem to be the kindest and wisest of all. You didn't mock my advice or try to shoot me. I am happy with you and I will help you. Come, sit on my tail and I will take you to the inn." As the fox spoke, its tail grew long enough for the prince to sit on. The moment the prince sat down, the fox flew into the air, and in no time, they crossed plains and mountains, reaching the same village. Following the fox's advice, the prince chose to stay in the small and shabby inn, avoiding the beautifully decorated one. The next morning, he resumed his journey. After walking a short distance, on his way ahead, the prince encountered the fox again. The fox said, "Now I will tell you what you should do next. Keep walking straight, and you will come across a large castle guarded by soldiers. Don't be afraid of them and walk straight inside because they will all be asleep at this time. Boldly enter the castle, cross the rooms, and go to the place where the golden bird is kept in a simple wooden cage. Take the bird along with the wooden cage and leave the castle. Near the wooden cage, you will also see a very beautiful golden cage. Whatever you do, do not put the bird in that cage. If you try to move the bird from the wooden cage to the golden cage, you will regret it later." Saying this, the fox once again allowed the prince to sit on its tail. In no time, it carried him to the castle. Upon reaching the castle, the prince saw that the guards were indeed asleep. Without any fear, he walked straight into the palace. Soon he reached the room where the golden bird was sitting in a wooden cage. Near the cage were 3 golden apples. The prince immediately recognized that these were the same apples from his father's orchard. The golden bird was so beautiful that the prince stood mesmerized, staring at it. He was just about to pick it up and leave when his eyes fell on the stunning golden cage nearby. The cage was adorned with various precious stones and seemed perfect for the golden bird. Forgetting the fox's warning, the prince took the bird out of the wooden cage and placed it in the golden cage. As soon as the bird was put in the new cage, it began to screech loudly. The prince hadn't even stepped out of the room when several guards rushed in. They captured the prince. It was then that the prince realized his mistake and regretted ignoring the fox's advice. He remembered what the fox had told him, but what could be done now? The soldiers dragged him to the king's court. When the king questioned him, the prince explained everything. The king said, "You entered my palace to steal. I cannot forgive you. You will be sentenced to death. However, I will give you one chance. If you bring me a golden horse, I will not only spare your life, but also give you the golden bird." To save his life, the prince had no choice but to accept the king's condition. He set out in search of the golden horse. Upon leaving the castle, he saw that the fox was waiting for him. He told the fox everything. The fox, disappointed, said, "I will not help you anymore. You did not do as I advised. If you had listened to me and acted accordingly, you would not be in this trouble, and the golden bird would have been yours by now." The prince replied, "Please forgive me this time. I made a mistake. I cannot complete this task without your help. The king has ordered me to bring him the golden horse." The prince pleaded, "If I don't follow the king's orders, he will have me executed." The fox replied, "Fine, I forgive you. Now listen carefully. Sit on my tail and we'll go straight ahead. After some distance, you will come across another castle. In the stables of that castle, you will find a golden horse tied up. The castle staff will all be asleep. Quietly go in and untie the horse. But remember this. Near the horse there will be 2 saddles. One will be an old worn leather saddle, and the other will be a dazzling golden saddle. Do not touch the golden saddle. Use the old leather one, mount the horse, and ride it out of the castle immediately." The prince promised to follow the fox's instructions precisely. The fox let him sit on its tail and carried him to the castle. In no time. Upon reaching the castle, the fox dropped the prince off and left. The prince entered the castle through its gate and saw that all the servants were indeed asleep. He soon reached the stables, where a magnificent golden horse was tied. The prince approached and saw that the horse was truly made of gold. It was more beautiful than anything he had ever dreamed of. He untied the horse and prepared to leave, but then his eyes fell on the corner where the golden saddle was kept. The saddle was exquisite, adorned with diamonds and pearls. Beside it lay an old, torn leather saddle. The prince thought it unworthy to put an old saddle on such a splendid horse. Ignoring the fox's warning, he picked up the golden saddle and began fastening it to the horse. As soon as he did, the horse neighed loudly, waking the castle staff. Within moments, the prince was captured. The soldiers bound his hands and presented him before their king. The king, after hearing the story, said, "You tried to steal my horse. For this, you deserve to be executed. However, I will spare your life if you do one task for me. Nearby, there is a golden palace where a beautiful princess resides. If you bring her to me, I will not only let you live, but also give you the golden horse." The poor prince found himself in another dire situation. He had no choice but to accept the king's condition. He set off to find the golden palace. After traveling some distance, he encountered the fox again. Somehow, the fox already knew everything that had happened. It said, "See? Once again, you ignored my advice, and now you're in even greater trouble. If you had listened to me, none of this would have happened." The prince apologized. "Please forgive me this time. I made a mistake again. I cannot complete this task without your help. The king has ordered me to bring him the princess from the golden palace." The fox sighed. "I feel sorry for you, so I will help you again. Come, I will take you near the golden palace. When we get there, hide behind the palace. In the evening, the princess will come out to bathe in the pond. When she does, step forward and hold her hand. As soon as you touch her, she will agree to go with you. But remember this. Do not let her return to the palace. She will ask to say goodbye to her parents, but don't listen to her or you'll land in trouble again." Saying this, the fox stretched out its tail, and the prince climbed on. In no time, the fox flew him to the golden palace. Once there, the prince hid behind a tree. In the evening, the princess came out to bathe in the pond. The prince gathered his courage, stepped forward, and held her hand. The moment he touched her, the princess agreed to go with him. She said, "Prince, wherever you take me, I will go with you, but let me first meet my parents for a moment." The prince refused. "No, that won't happen. You must come with me right away." But the princess began to cry. Seeing such a beautiful princess in tears melted the prince's heart. Finally, he gave in and said, "Fine, go meet your parents briefly, but return immediately." The princess entered the palace, but as soon as she stepped inside, the guards woke up. They captured the prince and presented him before their king. The prince regretted his mistake, but it was too late. The soldiers bound him and brought him to the king. The king was furious and ordered, "This prince tried to abduct the princess. Hang him at once." Hearing this, the prince began to cry and beg for mercy. After some thought, the king said, "I cannot take back my command, but I will give you one chance. If you complete one task for me, your life will be spared. There is a large mountain in front of our castle which ruins the beauty of our palace. If you can remove this mountain within 8 days, I will forgive you. If you clear this mountain, we will forgive you and marry the princess to you," the king said. The prince stood outside the fort, staring at the massive mountain. In his hand was a small shovel, and he couldn't fathom how he could possibly dig through such a vast mountain in just 8 days. Still, he had to save his life, so he began digging. Day by day, 7 days passed, and despite his continuous effort, he had managed to dig out only one corner of the mountain. Frustrated and defeated, he sat down. Overwhelmed with anger at himself, he thought, "If only I had listened to the fox, things would have been so much better. The fox always gave me sound advice, and I ignored it every time, only to end up in deeper trouble." As the prince sat there with his head down, he suddenly noticed the fox's tail swaying near his feet. When he looked up, there she was, smiling at him. "So, how's it going?" the fox asked. "Honestly, I had no intention of helping you this time, but I've watched you dig for 7 days and felt sorry for you. So here I am, ready to help you again. Go and rest. I'll finish the job for you." This time, the prince decided to follow the fox's advice. He quietly got up and went to rest. Soon, he fell asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he could hardly believe his eyes. The mountain was gone, and the beautiful palace stood in clear view. The prince rushed to the king, who was overjoyed with his work. True to his word, the King immediately arranged the prince's marriage to the princess. As the prince set out with the lovely princess, he encountered the fox again on the road. "Congratulations, prince. I'm so happy to see you with the princess," said the fox. "But now you should also acquire the golden horse and the golden bird. They both belong to you and can be easily obtained." The prince was puzzled. "But how can I get the golden horse and the golden bird? I'm already taking this princess to the other king," he said. The fox advised, "Never give the princess to another king. She is your wife now. If you follow my instructions, you will easily obtain the golden horse and the golden bird. First, take the princess to the king who owns the golden horse. He'll be delighted and offer you the horse as a reward. Mount the horse, say goodbye to everyone, and lastly, bid farewell to the princess. When you approach her, grab her and pull her onto the horse, then ride away. The golden horse is so fast that no other horse in the world can catch it. Go and complete this task first. I'll meet you on the way and guide you further." The prince did exactly as the fox instructed. The king with the golden horse was thrilled and gave him the horse. The prince mounted it and said his goodbyes. Lastly, he approached the princess, pulled her onto the horse, and sped away, leaving the fort far behind. On the way, the fox awaited him under a tree. "Well done," she said. "Now it's time to get the golden bird. When you meet the king who owns it, he will be impressed by your golden horse. Tell him, first, give me the cage of the golden bird, and then I'll give you this horse. When he brings the cage, grab it, and ride off immediately. This way you'll secure the bird and no one will be able to catch you." Once again, the prince followed her advice. He stayed on the horse with the princess, and when the king handed him the cage, the prince quickly rode off with the golden bird, leaving the king behind. Later, the fox met the prince again on the road. The prince said, "You have helped me so much. Because of you, I now have the golden horse, the golden bird, and this beautiful princess. Tell me, how can I reward you? I must give you something. If you clear this mountain, we will forgive you and marry the princess to you," the king said. The prince stood outside the fort, staring at the massive mountain. In his hand was a small shovel, and he couldn't fathom how he could possibly dig through such a vast mountain in just 8 days. Still, he had to save his life, so he began digging. The fox replied, "If you're truly grateful, grant me one wish. Shoot an arrow and end my life. That would be the greatest favor you could do for me." The prince was shocked. "How could I possibly do that? You've done so much for me. How can I repay you by killing you? I can't do it." The fox looked deeply saddened and said, If you can't do this for me, that's fine. Go on your way, but I'm only advising you for your own good. Remember 2 things. First, never sit on the edge of a well. And second, never spend money to save people who are about to be hanged." The prince replied, "You're so strange. I don't understand your advice. Why would I ever sit on the edge of a well? And why would I waste money on those condemned to hang?" The fox didn't respond and simply bid him farewell, leaving the prince to his journey. The golden horse sped forward with the princess sitting alongside the prince, holding the cage with the golden bird. Soon, the prince arrived at a small village where the inn they had stayed in earlier was located. The villagers, especially the children, came out to see him. Everyone was astonished to see the handsome prince on a golden horse, accompanied by a beautiful princess. The prince noticed a commotion in the village garden. Curious, he asked what was happening. He was told that 2 men were about to be hanged. Intrigued, the prince went to see and was shocked to recognize the 2 men. They were his own brothers. They had been living in the well-furnished inn and committing various misdeeds, including gambling and borrowing large sums of money. Enraged by their behavior, the villagers had decided to hang them. The prince couldn't let this happen. He pleaded with the villagers, saying, "Take money from me and spare their lives." After much persuasion, the villagers agreed and released the brothers. The prince resumed his journey, taking his brothers with him. After some distance, they came across a well in the forest. The brothers suggested they rest by the well for a while. "Let's drink some cool water and then continue," they said. The prince, forgetting the fox's warning, agreed and sat on the edge of the well. While he rested, his brothers seized the opportunity and pushed him into the well. Then they took the princess, placed her on the golden horse, grabbed the cage with the golden bird, and left for their kingdom. The brothers returned home triumphantly. They told the king, "We have captured the golden bird that was stealing the golden apples from our orchard. We also bring you this golden horse and this princess." The king was overjoyed and the whole kingdom celebrated. But the princess was unhappy. She cried incessantly and refused to eat. The golden horse stopped eating, and the golden bird remained silent and gloomy in its cage. Meanwhile, the youngest prince was trapped in the well. Though it was deep, there was little water in it, so he survived. Sitting at the bottom, he lamented his fate and regretted not heeding the fox's advice. Just then, the fox appeared at the edge of the well and said, "Prince, I warned you not to sit on the edge of a well or help those destined for the gallows, but you didn't listen. No matter. I will help you one last time." The fox lowered its tail into the well. It grew so long that it reached the bottom, where the prince was. The prince grabbed the tail, and the fox pulled him out. Once out, the fox said, "Now, go home, but be cautious. Your brothers are your enemies and will harm you if they find you." The prince disguised himself by giving his fine clothes to a beggar and wearing the beggar's tattered ones. In this disguise, he returned to the palace. As soon as he entered, an astonishing thing happened. The golden horse neighed joyfully and began eating. The golden bird started singing and fluttering happily in its cage. The princess wiped away her tears and smiled for the first time. The king was bewildered and turned to the princess asking, "What is happening?" When the king asked the reason, she replied, "I had already told you the entire story. Your elder and middle sons have betrayed the younger prince. They have deceived you as well. But now your youngest son has returned, and that is why I am so happy. I have married him, and I can only be happy with him." She pointed to a man wearing ragged clothes and said, "There is your youngest prince." The king recognized his youngest son. He changed his opinion about him and began to see him as very wise and brave. He grew to love him even more and decided to place him on the throne. The elder and middle princes not only betrayed their younger brother but also deceived the king. This made the king very angry, and he banished them from the kingdom. Soon after, there was a grand wedding between the prince and the princess, and they lived happily together. However, the prince never forgot the fox who had helped him. One day, he decided to search for the fox in the forest. After much searching, he found the fox sitting quietly in the hollow of a tree. The fox looked very sad and had become even thinner. As soon as the fox saw the prince, it recognized him and said, "Ah, prince, what brings you here today?" The prince replied, "I came here to find you. Come, stay in my garden. You won't face any trouble there. In the forest, I know you struggle for food and live in fear of wild animals and hunters." The fox said, "No, prince, I am fine here. And what concern do you have with my troubles now? Your task is complete, and now you can happily live in your kingdom." The prince insisted, "No, you have done me a great favor. I want to reward you and keep you with me. The princess will also be happy to meet you." The fox replied, "If you truly want to reward me, then please do one thing for me. I had already asked you to shoot me with an arrow. This will benefit me. In fact, I am not a fox. I was cursed by a magician. I am actually the prince of the kingdom where your princess resides. The princess is my younger sister. If you shoot me with an arrow, I will be freed from this curse and can return to my kingdom." The prince was astonished upon hearing this. He immediately placed an arrow on his bow and shot it toward the fox. As soon as the arrow struck, the fox died, and from its body emerged a handsome prince. The two princes embraced each other. They returned to the palace, where the princess was overjoyed to meet her brother once again.